Jim Crow was this government-sanctioned segregation. So black people couldn't drink from the same water fountains as white people. You couldn't ride the same bus as white people. You couldn't live in the same neighborhood as white people. You couldn't eat at the same table as white people. You couldn't look a white woman in the face if you were a black man, or you could be lynched. It was a whole system, a legal system.
Yeah. The name of the law?
That was Jim Crow.
Oh, okay.
Jim Crow was in the 1950s. Yep, and it wasn't until 1965 that black people got the right to vote. 1965. So people like to talk about like it's a thing of the past, but it's not. We're still trying to build ourselves up from that period. It's new. 1865 is when Africans are freed from slavery, but it's another 100 years before we actually can really vote, because they put all of these boundaries and obstacles in place where if you couldn't read, you couldn't vote. If you didn't know the Constitution, you couldn't vote. They created all of these barriers to stop people from being able to vote. And so it wasn't until 1965, with the efforts of organizations like the SNCC, which was the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, young college students going down south, risking their lives, being chased by dogs, being lynched and killed, to organize the black people down there and say, no, you can vote. We got to get you the right to vote. And so that was in 1965. So it's not that far in the past. And even still today, they have a lot of issues with voting. Even in New York, with the recent elections we had, there was millions of people who couldn't vote because of issues with voter registration and all of these little tactics they use to keep us from being able to vote and have power. I think a lot of times we think like the government is going to save us, and it's really always been the people pushing the government. It never is the other way around, right? Frederick Douglass said that power concedes nothing without a demand. And so unless you have people demanding for programs, demanding for rights, demanding for respect, they're not just going to hand it over. It benefits them to keep us down, right? To keep us at this level. It's beneficial to some people. So I think it goes back to us everyday people building our own movements, building our own organizations, getting power, and then being able to say to the government, look, we want this kind of program here. We need this kind of program here for the young boys. We want to have a writing program for young girls. We want to have a health program. We have to give the government the ideas, because it was the same thing in the 1860s here. It was Africans fighting against their slave masters, burning the crops, demanding that we're not going to be slaves anymore. In the 1960s, it was the students who left the classroom, who started to protest, who went down south, organizing with people like Martin Luther King, having the bus boycotts, saying, look, we want to be on the bus the same as you. It was the people. It's always the people in the streets, on the ground, in the bush. It's the people on the ground who are gonna make it happen. Always. People is the power, mass power. My parents were the product of affirmative action. My grandparents were sharecroppers, right? 1 or 2 generations removed from slavery. And so my grandparents didn't have the chance to go to school, not able to read and write. And so my mom was like of that first generation, and my parents in the 60s, which were able to go to university because of affirmative action. So it definitely helped a whole generation. I know my community was able to be uplifted because we had parents who were able now to go to university, to get better jobs, and to move up out of the projects, to own their own homes, and things like that. So affirmative action was definitely instrumental in helping to move African Americans forward, because before then we weren't able to go to school because of Jim Crow, right? We were segregated. And we weren't even allowed into universities. So it was because of this affirmative action and students in the 60s fighting and demanding that we have the right to go to school. We're Americans, and we should be able to reap the benefits of the society which we helped to build,